one in particular, she said, you know, well, if you were me, would you go on camera? And I had to say no, and I did.
Tell me how important journalism ethics and making ethical decisions, how important that is in your field.
I would say that on a daily basis, there are ethical challenges to news reporting. You are covering difficult things, you're invading people's privacy, you're asking nosy questions, and all of those, I think, should be preceded by thinking what the right ethical thing to do is. And it's a common excuse when tragedy's happening that it's crazy and chaotic and there's not time to do that, but I think there's always time to do that, and I think you should think about it before the tragedy happens, how you could handle things in a delicate, sensitive way.
So Suzanne, you mentioned, you know, some of the ethical decisions in times of tragedy. Can you give us some examples of that, you know, things that you faced in the past where you could have gone either way, but you made an ethical decision?
So in breaking news situations, I think you're always worried that somebody's going to give too much information live on your air that could be hurtful to somebody out there. If it's a student who knows of several people who have died, we're always worried that they're going to blurt out their names live on the air. And I think the only way you can prevent that is to preface the interview before the live coverage begins with, please don't tell me any names, don't give me any specific names. But it's always a risk when you're on live TV that somebody's going to say something that they shouldn't say on TV. And once it's out, it's out. And so it's a fine line to walk, and it always makes me nervous. Well, I think one concern is when you're interviewing younger people. You need to handle them, I think, a little bit more sensitively because they're not adults yet. You don't want to pounce on somebody who's just experienced the worst day of their lives. So I think you really need to assess whether the information you're going to get from the interview is worth the trauma it may cause them to relive what they've just seen at truly the worst moment, the worst day of their life. So I think and especially when it's young people or children.
Can you tell us a bit about kind of the core principles and ethical guidelines you have, and you know the difficulties it is, you know, holding on to those in a profession that really kind of glorifies, you know, maybe cutting corners, breaking some rules to be first or to break that news? How do you really, you know, hold true to yourself and your own principles when maybe the competition isn't?
I think all the time you should think about being a good person and then a journalist second. And by being a good person, it doesn't mean you have to be nice to everyone or not ask the probing questions or ask the difficult questions, but you have to value being an ethical, conscientious person before being a competitive journalist. And you're right, it's so competitive out there. There is a drive to be first and fastest and most obnoxious and most aggressive and most probing. But I think you can still accomplish your greater goal while doing the right thing. And I think it helps if you're working with a photographer or a producer that you trust, that you can bounce some of these ideas on the way to the story, over the phone from the story, and just say, take 30 seconds from the mayhem and say, should we be doing this? Is this okay to air? Should I be asking these questions of somebody who's, you know, just been traumatized, or somebody who's young, or somebody who's injured? Go over those questions. It takes 30 seconds. I think you should never underestimate how hard it's going to be. And even today, I'm still, I feel like because I've been doing this so long, I should have like a thicker skin, but I still will go to a story and feel like my breath has been taken away because I can't imagine what the person is going through.